Imagine for a second, right, that you are holding this familiar ancient text, but instead of reading it in this quiet, reverent whisper, like some, dry, dusty historical document, you actually choose to read it as a tense, high-stakes political thriller.
Oh, I love that approach. It completely shifts the lens.
Right, because when you strip away the stained glass and you look really closely at the actual mechanics of the history and the economics and the power struggles playing out in the dirt of the first century, that is exactly the kind of drama we have on our hands today.
It really is. I mean, we are so used to sanitizing these narratives, right? We completely forget they happened in the grit of the real world. You're talking about real desperate people living under extreme military occupation.
Okay, let's unpack this because today's deep dive is taking us straight into that grit. We are looking at a prep document that basically breaks down Matthew chapter 21. And our mission today, for you listening, is to explore the explosive beginning of Jesus' final week in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and the setting here is crucial.
Exactly. The year is roughly AD 30. We are in Roman-occupied Judea. And it is the Passover festival. So the city isn't just full, it is absolutely bursting at the seams with swelling crowds of pilgrims who have traveled from all over the known world.
Which is, frankly, the perfect recipe for a crisis. I mean, the atmosphere in Jerusalem during Passover was an absolute powder keg.
A total powder keg.
You have hundreds of thousands of people gathered to celebrate this historic liberation from slavery, right?
Yeah.
But they're simultaneously suffocating under the oppressive weight of a foreign military occupation. So it really sets the scene for this inevitable clash of power, economics, and religion.
Yeah, and to really understand how this tension ignited, we kind of have to start right at the city gates. The chapter opens with what we usually call the triumphal entry.
Right.
The crowds are swelling, they're laying their cloaks on the road, and they're waving palm branches. And I think to a modern reader, waving a palm branch just looks like a nice festive greeting. It looks like a parade.
Oh, totally. But in that specific cultural and historical context, waving palm branches was, well, it was far from a simple greeting.
What was it then?
It was a deeply nationalistic symbol. It was basically a throwback to past military victories. Specifically, it echoed the Maccabean victories from about a century and a half earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which we can trace back to historical texts like 1 Maccabees 13.51. And the Maccabees, just for context, were this family of Jewish rebels who actually succeeded in overthrowing their foreign oppressors.
Wow.
So when the crowds are out there waving these branches, they aren't just saying hello, they are intentionally evoking the memory of a successful, violent revolution.
So they are essentially waving the ancient equivalent of a revolutionary flag, like right in front of the Roman Empire's face.
Exactly. And the geography of where this starts is just as loaded, honestly. The parade begins at the Mount of Olives, and according to the prep document, this location was already deeply steeped in eschatological hope.
Wait, let's define that for a second, because eschatological is a pretty heavy theological term.
Fair enough. It basically refers to the end of days, or like the final, ultimate climax of history.
Got it.
If you read the ancient prophet Zechariah, specifically Zechariah 14, there was this profound, deeply rooted cultural expectation that the Mount of Olives was exactly the geographic spot where God's final, victorious, world-ending intervention would begin.
Okay, so you've got these people in the crowd, and they are desperate. I mean, they are hungry for a military liberator. They want a warrior king who's going to ride in, overthrow Roman taxation, crush the oppression, and just give them their country back.
Right. They want blood.
They do.
Yeah.
Which makes the next detail so jarring to me. The text points to Matthew 21.5, and it quotes this ancient prophecy saying, "Say to daughter Zion, see your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey."
Yeah, the donkey changes everything.
It really does. I was thinking about this, and it's like an oppressed city waiting for a rebel leader to roll in on a heavily armored tank to start a war. But instead, he just leisurely pedals in on a bicycle.
That is a great way to put it. That imagery captures the dissonance perfectly.
But let me push back on this strategy for a second. If this crowd is screaming for a war, right, and he rolls in on a donkey, doesn't that just make him look, well, weak? Why risk the profound disappointment of this volatile crowd by intentionally choosing a beast of burden when they are so clearly begging for a war horse?
What's fascinating here is how he is navigating this incredibly volatile space. Up to this point in his ministry, Jesus had kept his messianic identity relatively suppressed.
Right, the whole messianic secret thing.
Exactly. He wasn't out there making bold public declarations of kingship. But here he suddenly orchestrates an open, undeniable claim to the throne.
Yeah.
But by choosing the donkey instead of the warhorse, he is masterfully subverting their expectations in real time. He is basically saying, I am the king you've been waiting for, but I am entirely rejecting the militaristic, violent kingdom you are expecting.
Oh, wow. So he's taking the title, but he's totally redefining the job description on the spot.
He is, and it's a really dangerous tightrope to walk, because he is accepting their praises as a king, which is high treason against Rome, while simultaneously refusing to give them the armed rebellion that they actually want.
And even if he is riding a donkey, the sheer noise and scale of this subversive parade isn't just for show, because he takes all of that momentum, all of that revolutionary energy for the Mount of Olives, and he doesn't lead them to a Roman fortress to fight soldiers.
No, he doesn't.
He leads them directly to the center of cultural power, the temple. And he aims that energy squarely at the religious elite's economic engine.
And we have to pause here because the political tension of this specific move cannot be overstated.
Oh, absolutely.
Procurator Pontius Pilate maintained these heavily armed Roman garrisons in the city, stationed right next to the temple, specifically to suppress the exact kind of unrest that Jesus was currently stirring up.
Right. They were literally looking down on the course.
Exactly. By causing this public spectacle, Jesus risked immediate, brutal Roman intervention. They were constantly watching the crowds from their towers, just waiting for a riot to break out.
And Jesus walks right into the temple courts anyway, which is wild. So, according to the source material, the commerce happening inside the temple was a highly lucrative franchise. It was operated by the Sadducean priests. Now, for you listening, who exactly are the Sadducees in this socio-political hierarchy?
So the Sadducees were the aristocratic priestly elite. They controlled the temple operations and held the most political power among the Jewish leadership.
Right.
But their power relied entirely on a cooperative alliance with Rome. They kept the peace, and in exchange, Rome let them run the highly profitable temple system.
A system that forced pilgrims to participate in a captive market.
Precisely. Pilgrims traveling for Passover couldn't just bring their own local currency to pay the required temple tax.
Because everyday Roman coinage bore the image of the emperor, right?
Right, which was considered idolatrous in a sacred space. So they were forced to exchange their secular coinage for specialized temple currency.
Of course they were.
And on top of that, they had to buy unblemished animals for sacrifice directly from the officially sanctioned temple merchants. And because the Sadducean elites had a total monopoly, they were charging extortionate, astronomical rates for both the money exchange and the animals.
It's unbelievable. You travel hundreds of miles, you finally get to the gates of your holiest site, and you realize you have to pay a staggering markup just to participate in your own religion. It's a spiritual shakedown.
It really was.
And because there's no alternative, there's absolutely no way for a pilgrim to opt out. You either paid the cartel or you couldn't practice your faith. And that is the exact systemic trap Jesus walks into when he reaches the temple courts.
Yeah.
Matthew 21:12-13 says, Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the moneychangers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers.
Yeah, he hits them right in the wallet.
But wait, help me understand the logistics here. Because you just said Pilate's armed guards are stationed right there, watching for a riot.
Right.
If Jesus is literally halting a massive extortionate economy right under the noses of heavily armed Roman guards, why did they arrest him the second he flipped the first table? It seems unbelievable that he got away with shutting down an elite market in broad daylight.
That's a great observation, and it raises an important question about the nature of his protest. It wasn't a mindless, violent riot against the soldiers. It was a targeted, prophetic disruption.
Okay.
The guards were likely watching to see if this would turn into an armed insurrection against Rome itself. But Jesus wasn't attacking Romans, he was attacking his own religious leaders.
Ah, I see.
Furthermore, by disrupting this market, Jesus was directly protesting the systemic corruption. The Sadducean priests were enriching themselves through their alliance with Rome, exploiting the very peasants they were supposed to be spiritually guiding.
Man, that's heavy.
It is. Jesus is attacking the elite's economic engine, and by doing so, he is exposing their corrupt political alliance with the occupiers. The crowd was likely so stunned and perhaps so supportive of seeing these extortionists put in their place that the authorities were caught completely off guard.
It is staggering when you think about the physical courage that took. I mean, he is halting an entire revenue stream. And obviously, an economic disruption of that scale demands a response.
Definitely.
The establishment can't just let an uncredentialed teacher from Galilee shut down their monopoly. The leaders have to strike back to reclaim their authority. But before that inevitable showdown happens, the text notes this really bizarre moment where Jesus symbolically curses a barren fig tree.
Yeah, the fig tree incident.
So what does this all mean? How does a random piece of agricultural fruit connect to a room full of furious priests whose economy you just wrecked?
I know, it seems like an arbitrary detail to a modern reader, right? But in the literary structure of Matthew's account, it is the key to understanding the entire conflict. Well, a fig tree usually produces fruit before or at the same time as its leaves. So a tree full of leaves should be full of fruit. But Jesus finds a tree that has leaves but is completely barren. It has all the outward appearance of life, but it is producing absolutely nothing.
Oh, wow. Just like the temple.
Exactly. The temple had all the outward appearance of religion, bustling activity, beautiful architecture, constant sacrifices, but it was producing no actual spiritual fruit. It was a corrupt shell.
So when he curses the tree, he's basically enacting a real-time object lesson for his disciples about what he's doing to the religious leadership.
He is, and the irony is just palpable when the chief priests and the elders come to him immediately after this to challenge his authority.
Right.
They ask him, essentially, who gave you the right to shut down our temple operations? They are demanding to see his credentials.
Yeah, they want to see his permit.
Exactly. But by focusing purely on their jurisdiction and protecting their cartel, rather than acknowledging the extortion happening under their watch, they are acting out the very barrenness of the fig tree. Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. By trying to trap him to protect their own power, they prove they are the cursed, fruitless leaders.
They are walking completely blind into the metaphor. They challenge his authority, hoping he gives them a straight legal answer they can use to arrest him for treason or heresy.
Yep.
But instead of backing down, Jesus escalates the conflict publicly through storytelling. He turns his defense into a devastating offense. Here's where it gets really interesting. He counters their trap with a series of parables, specifically the parable of the two sons and the parable of the wicked tenants.
And that parable of the wicked tenants is particularly aggressive. I mean, it is a thinly veiled accusation delivered to a massive audience.
Right, so the story goes that a landowner plants a vineyard and rents it out to some tenant farmers. When harvest time comes, the landowner sends his servants to collect his share of the fruit. But the tenants beat one, kill another, and stone a third.
It gets violent fast. It does. And finally, the landowner sends his own son, thinking, they will respect my son. But the tenants see the heir and say, let's kill him and take his inheritance. So they throw him out of the vineyard and murder him.
It is a brilliant, devastating narrative trap.
Let's expand on why this was so damaging. In an ancient Middle Eastern honor and shame culture, public perception is everything, right?
Absolutely everything.
This is essentially the ancient equivalent of a public diss track, but with life or death stakes. He's standing in front of the very people who hold his life in their hands, the people who have the political power to execute him, and he is publicly accusing them of premeditated murder to their faces.
Yeah.
He's exposing their internal plot to the very crowds they're trying to control.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Jesus doesn't just leave it as a story. He seals the indictment by quoting their own sacred scripture back to them.
Oh.
He quotes Psalm 118, which is found in Matthew 21.42, asking them, have you never read in the scriptures? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes.
The rejected stone becoming the cornerstone. He's looking right at the religious elite and basically telling them, you are the builders. You are the ones rejecting me. But God is going to bypass you completely and build the entire foundation of his new kingdom on me anyway.
And that is the exact moment the trap snaps shut on the leaders. The Herodian and Sadducean elites, listening to this, suddenly realize he is speaking directly about them.
They finally get it.
They do. He hasn't just evaded their legal trap. He has completely dismantled their moral authority in front of the massive Passover crowds.
He used their own trap to expose them.
Yeah, and this public indictment sets an irreversible trajectory. The power struggle has now turned completely deadly.
There's no going back.
None. The text makes it clear. By the end of this chapter, the religious leaders actively begin looking for a way to arrest him. They realize they can't debate him, they can't trap him with words, and they can't control the narrative as long as he is speaking. So they resolve that they have to eliminate him.
It is just a breathtaking sequence of events.
Yeah.
I mean, From a subversive parade on a donkey to an economic blockade in the temple to a public dismantling of corrupt leaders using nothing but storytelling and agricultural metaphors.
It's incredible.
When you really break it down, this text is an absolute masterclass in challenging corrupt power structures, exposing extortionate economics, and calling out political complicity. It shows how true authority doesn't need heavily armed Roman guards or an extortionate financial monopoly to make its point.
It really leaves us with a profound realization about human nature and power. You know, the religious and political elites of 80/30 were so blinded by their desire to maintain their own power, their wealth, and their comfortable alliances with their oppressors that they completely missed the cornerstone standing right in front of them. It makes you wonder what systemic blinders are operating in our own modern institutions today.
Man, that is a heavy question. And honestly, you are the third person in this conversation, and if that thought leaves you questioning things, we really want to hear from you. Seriously, drop a comment down below with your thoughts on today's historical drama and these intense power struggles of 80/30 Jerusalem. Who do you think took the biggest risk in this chapter? Was it Jesus, the crowds, or the elites? Let us know. Also, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the political thriller of the past, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss our future deep dives. It really helps us out. And be sure to check the description below for exclusive links and more resources on the historical documents we covered today. You definitely want to read up on this. And stick around, because I'll tease you with this. The next deep dive is going to be even more intense as the stakes in Jerusalem continue to rise to an absolute boiling point. It's a showdown you will not want to miss. See you next time.